your age and when you were born.
My name is Henry S. Zarini. I was born May 25th, 1889 at Marshall, Colorado. My parents moved to Louisville when I was 10 months old. And we lived in the house which is now 834 Lafarge, next to the old Pillar of Fire Church.
About how many houses were in Louisville at that time, Reed?
Well, there was nothing this way and nothing west. There was only about 300 people when I came to Louisville. See, my dad came from Gillespie, Illinois, and settled in Louisville. Or in Marshall.
Why did he come to Louisville?
Well, that's when the first mine in Boulder County was opened in Marshall, and they called it the Marshall Mine. And after they opened the mines in Louisville, he moved to Louisville. And I've lived on Lafarge Avenue all my life.
Did he ever tell you why he wanted to live in Louisville instead of Marshall?
Well, Marshall was just a little camp. There's nothing there, nothing at all. Here there was a few stores and things like that. They had to go to Boulder for everything, and they had to walk. They didn't have no transportation at all.
And they walked to Boulder?
They walked to Boulder. My dad used to walk during the First Depression. My dad went to Boulder to get money out of the bank, and by golly, he got lost coming home, and he found himself over there by Erie.
Oh my!
His clothes were torn to shreds going through wire fences because he was afraid somebody was going to hold him up.
What was his name, Reed?
My dad's name was Joseph Zarini, Sr.
And then your mother's name?
Virginia Zarini. And I never did see any of my grandparents because they were all, some of them were in Italy, and my mother went to South America. And we only heard from her once after she got to South America. She did migrated with one of her sons down there. And when I was a boy, I asked my dad if he ever wanted to go back to Italy. He says, no. He says, I don't want to go back to Italy because we had too hard a time. He says, I want to be an American. That's the way my dad and mother were. They didn't even teach us Italian. I can't even talk Italian.
Was your father always a coal miner?
He worked in the mines till he was 71 years old. He had an injury to his eye, and then after that they wouldn't let him work anymore. And he sure was a good dad to us kids. It was a big family of us. There were 7. And I lost my brother Bill in that Interurban Wreck in 1920. You've heard of it, haven't you?
Yes, we have heard of it. What can you tell us about it?
Well,
what do you remember?
It was on Labor Day, and there was a bunch of people from Louisville who wanted to go to Denver to see the Denver Western League team play a baseball game at Old Merchants Park. And they ran from the country kitchen to the depot, where the old depot used to be when the Interurbans were running. They had to run from that corner to catch that Interurban. And he got killed in that head-on collision down there by Gilbert. It was on the 20th. It was on Labor Day in 1920. See, I bought this home in 1920. I've been here ever since. And those trees, my two big pine trees, I planted them when they were 12 inches high. And now they're 50 foot taller better. And I had a picket fence in front of my home at that time. And I've got a picture of that fence with hailstones on it that big in 1924. People don't believe it, but I got the picture to show it.
Rick, did you ever mine coal?
I'm the only one of the family that never mined coal.
And after you graduated from high school, what did you do?
I went to CU one year. I won a scholarship. I'll show you that too after a while. I'll show you my diplomas from the 8th grade and 12th grade. Great big ones, about that big. And I even got my salutatory address, my valedictorian address, and my debate about the Indians, and all on programs when I graduated from the 8th grade.
Well, after you left CU, then what did you do?
After, well, you see, I won a scholarship, and I went to CU. I and another young fellow from Louisville by the name of Billy Lewis. We roomed together with a private family in Boulder. We paid $5 a week for room and board at that time. And I used to come home at noon on Fridays. And that's how I got started to work for Robert Thorlaway. I got a picture of the butcher shop.
Now, could I interrupt just
Yes.
a minute and ask where this butcher shop was located?
It's located right there where the library is right now. Right on the corner was a bake shop, the old Bert Ostrander's bake shop, and then there was the Mike Rumpelda's barber shop, and Robert Thorway's butcher shop. There was a 2-story house in there, and then the old Bungalow Drug, and the Austin place.
Okay.
Yeah, and across the street was the old Red and White grocery store, and Mangus's clothing store where the laundromat is, and the cleaning shop.
Rick, was there ever anything between what was Mangus's and the red and white in that lot?
No,
that's
no,
empty
nothing
now?
in between there.
Nothing's
It's
ever
always
been
been
there.
vacant.
That's what I thought.
It's always been vacant. And on the corner where the exquisite trophy shop is, well, there's grocery stores there. W.A. Burke had a grocery store there, and then the Hub.
Uh-huh.
And then where Luigi's is, there used to be a garage there that burnt down. And next to that was a little shoe shop, the telephone office, a little restaurant, and then Palillo started a shoe shop. And then on where the mortuary is now, there used to just be an old home there before not Henning, but who was in here before Henning?
Was it Lawson?
No, what's his name? He went to California.
Powell.
Powell, yeah, Powell came down from Wyoming, and so did Henning. See, Powell started it, see, and then Henning took over. And then up the street to where the old Hub used to be, where Spud used to be, and where Louisville Electric, nothing in there but old homes, nothing, no business or anything there.
Well, Bill Schutz's...
Bill Schutz was right there on the corner where Cedars is.
Right.
Yeah. He had a filling station there. He used to buy gas from him for my Model Ts.
Mm-hmm.
I had Model Ts when I first bought a car, and my first one was in 1917. I had 3 of them. And since then I've had nothing but Plymouths.
After you left working for Robert Thirlaway...
Well, I worked 10 years for Robert Thorway. See, I got started him on a part-time basis. When I was going to school at CU, I'd come home at noon on Interurban. Then I'd work for him Friday afternoon and on Saturdays. And then that long coal strike came.
Now, which one was that?
Well, that lasted 5 years, It was in 1908. Lasted till 1913. Well, my dad was a coal miner. He couldn't afford to send me to school. So when Robert found out I couldn't go to school anymore, he just said to me, "Rick, you want a steady job?" I said, "Sure." He said, "I'll teach you how to cut meat." Well, he's the man that taught me how to cut meat, and I cut meat for 40 years. 10 years for Robert Thorlaway. Then I went to Marshall and worked in the Rocky Mountain Company store for Mr. Antoine, Josephine Antoine's dad. Do you remember that opera singer?
Yeah.
I knew her when she was a little girl, 12 years old.
We talked about her yesterday. She's the one that I think studied under Grant, I believe.
Yeah, well, yeah. Alexander Grant was her teacher, and he was Lois's teacher when she went to CU, too. He's the guy that brought Lois's voice out, Alexander Grant. So I worked over there 2 years. When I started over there, I was getting married, and I got married in January 1917, and I was getting $50 a month in my groceries at cost.
That was good.
Those days, and we saved $5 a month. on $50 a month. When I left there, they'd raised my wages to $75 a month. First month I was there, I had to take inventory. All I had to do was take care of the meat market, see. The boss, Mr. Antone, came to me after the first month, after the inventory was taken, and he always called me Henry. He said, Henry, he said, you got to cut your meat prices. I says, why? You made too much money for us last month. He says, how come? I says, I used the same price as your other meat cutter did. Oh, he was no meat cutter. He says, he was a butcher. So I says, all right, I'll cut everything a nickel a pound. I cut everything. I still made him enough money. And every week I had to go to Boulder with the team of horses and get a load of ice for our old ice boxes. They didn't have refrigeration those days, you know. And for a while I lived in Boulder in a rooming house, and I used to ride back and forth. I'd catch the bus in Boulder at 6:20 in the morning. I mean the Interurban, and catch the one back at 6:10. And at 6 o'clock, Mr. Antone would holler at me. He'd say, Henry, close up. It's time you to go home. And one time we got caught in a blizzard up there. Johnny Porter was working at the casino up at the Gore Mine when it was going full blast. He wouldn't let us go home that night when that blizzard came up. I said, why can't we go home? He said, well, because I'm afraid you won't be able to get back in the morning. And that night, that blizzard blew an Interurban car off of the railroad tracks a half a mile north of the depot. Those people was in that car from midnight till 6 o'clock the next morning, and we didn't know it. We was asleep in the store. He told, make you a bed. He says, there's plenty of bedding here. So we found out they were up there, and we had one of those big galvanized coffee pots, and we had a lot of donuts and rolls. And I said, go up and get those people and bring them down. We can give them coffee and donuts anyhow until they get their urban straightened out, which they did in about 8 o'clock that morning. And so after up there, Marshall Root McCorkle needed a meat cutter real bad. Ring Denigi used to work for him. Put him on the spur of the moment. So he called me up. And he says, Rico, he says, I need a meat cutter. I said, how come? Well, he says, Ring quit me. He says, you want to come and work for me? And I said, well, sure, I'd rather work here than drive to Marshall. I drove a Model T then to Marshall. So I come and work for Luton. I worked for him for 28 years till he sold out to Charlie and Quentin Thomas. It'll be 27 years on the first day of March that I quit cutting meat. And part of that time I sold insurance for State Farm as a part-time agent. That's how I educated Lois. Part-time earnings from State Farm put her through University of Colorado. And then when she graduated from high school in, she graduated in 41. And she went almost 6 years to the music school. She likes 2 hours of having a master's, and she won't go finish. And so I worked a year after. She taught at Fort Lupton the first year, and I quit. It'll be 27 years ago, on March the 1st, I quit cutting meat. And I went full-time in the insurance business, and I made a success of it. And I got a 20-year certificate from State Farm, and I worked for him when I was going to high school. You know, I can tell you about the Blue Parrot when it was a bowling alley. I was only 13 years old. Mossoni and I, we set pins for a nickel a game. When they quit the bowling alley, then Joe Huber put his drugstore in there, and I used to come down at noon, let him go to lunch, and I'd come down in the evening, let him go to supper. On Saturdays when I had no school, I'd go down and shine the soda fountain and wipe all these bottles, all these big bottles, you know, where he kept the ingredients for his prescriptions and his patent medicines and everything.
About what time would you, about what year would you say that the bank...
Well, when I was working for Robert Thorway, that was before I was married. Heck, I was only in the early 20s when the bank went broke. You know, the Miller Barn and, you know, the Millers from Lafayette was the head guys, and they made some bad loans, see? So, Robert said to me one day, he heard something about it being shaky. He had a note
You remember what year this was?
Well, let's see. I wasn't over 20, 22 years old. It could have been 1910, 11, and 12, someplace in there. Robert says, I got a note up there. He says, I think I'll go up and pay it all. It was a small one. It wasn't a big couple $100. So he went up there and he got the note, come back, and he noticed it had been altered. He says, something fishy. He told me about it. He says, this note's been altered, Rick. He says, there must be something wrong up there. And I had about $600 and some dollars in the savings account in the bank then. And some of it didn't belong to me. It belonged to that old bachelor that used to live with my folks. He lived with them for 40 years. Old Joe Geis, he's just like a second dad to us kids. Lived with him for 40 years. And I had some of his, he used to give me some of his money, you know, so he wouldn't drink it up. He used to drink a lot. He wouldn't drink it all up. I said, give me some of that money out of your paycheck. And I took it down and put it in my name, you see. And so I went up to the bank that afternoon. Scotty Longmore, you've heard of him. Well, he was working in there, and I went in and he says, Rick, what can I do for you? Scotty? I says, I want $500 out of my savings account. She says, can't give it to you. I says, you better give it to me. I says, why? Because if you don't, I says, I'm going to go up to the telephone office, I says, and I'm going to call the bank examiner. Oh, don't do that. I says, don't do that. Come on back. They had a back room back there, you know. Come on back. I said, how much did you say you want? I said, I want $500. So we got a blank check. I wrote a check for $500, and he gave it to me. The next day it was closed.
Well, you lost money?
I lost
then?
money, yeah. I only got 10% of what was left. I didn't have much left, only $100 and some.
That was a lot.
Yeah, a lot of people lost money, I'll tell you in a break. Then we didn't have the bank for a long time. Then they opened the First State Bank, you know, down where the public service office is.
Right.
And then, of course,
Then they were robbed.
yeah. And heck, and boy, it was awful hard to do business with. Because I remember when Lois bought her first car after she taught a year. She taught a year at Fort Lupton, and she saved her money, and then next year she went to Syracuse, Kansas, but she had to have transportation. So while she's over at CU, she used to do a lot of entertaining over there and play for Alexander Grant for his voice pupils. You know, Lois is a good sight reader. And she could play music for any of his students, see. When she didn't have a class, she'd always be in the music school playing accompaniments. He paid her. She used to entertain and get paid. When she graduated from college, she had $850 I'd saved for her in the bank. She used to sing in some of the big churches over there, Presbyterian, Congregational, and the Christian Science Church. I used to take her over every Sunday morning to Christian Science Church. All she had to do was sing one song and then conduct a congregation and the other hymns. And so I bought her a Buick Coupe when she went to Syracuse. And after that, she always saved her money and bought her own cars. She just bought a new car this week. Oh, she got a little car. Yeah, she's getting away from this high gas. No, and Lois is a good music teacher. I wish she'd have stayed teaching. She taught 6 years at the second worst school in Denver to teach in, Horseman Junior High. You know, you heard of Della Golden?
Oh, yes.
Well, Della was the head, she was dean of girls down there. One night Mary and I went with Lois whenever she had her chorus singing. We was waiting for Lois to put her music away, and she was talking to us, says, you know, Rico, since your daughter came down here to teach music, says we've had the best music the school ever had. And Lois helped design their new music room down there at Horseman, but she never used it. Yeah, and she had some pupils. She had 3 pupils down there too. And down there. She could have had a lot of pupils here in Louisville if she'd wanted to teach. You know, she's tutored 2 of the nuns up here, the Irish nuns. Boy, I would see the improvement in them girls. Now, anything else you want to ask me?
Well, wanted to go back to that bank building. Now, do you remember when it became a bank?
Well, I couldn't I couldn't tell you just exactly. It was in the early 1900s anyhow.
But it was a drugstore before.
Well, I don't know. I might have been a little too young to know that.
Oh, okay.
You know, because, they opened the coal mines here in Louisville in 1878 when Louisville was started. A fellow by the name of Louis Novotny.
Did anybody ever live on this land before the town
No,
was
it was
platted?
just, my deed shows it was just farmland. Some outfit in England bought it. You remember I was going to give you that there old...
Yeah, I want to see that.
I'll have to look it up and I'll bring it down to the library for you.
So
You
you
even
can
just could get a copy.
Well, I got a new abstract. I won't need it.
Oh,
I had a new one made.
wonderful.
This is an old one, just typewritten, on ordinary paper. It was made by Miller Barn and Affolter when Mr. Affolter was an attorney here. And it also covers Pasquale's house over here, where Pasquale lives. Mrs. Dixon here had she lived next door to me, Grandma Dixon. That's Vera, what's her name?
Taylor.
Vera Taylor's grandmother.
Oh, grandmother.
Newton Dixon was her dad,
Yes.
It was her grandmother that owned that place and this place. See, I bought this place from Mrs. Dixon in 1920. Boy, was she good to my kids. My little boy, she just thought the world of him. And
Rico, I didn't know you had a little boy.
I'll show you his picture after a while, too. He's the cutest little guy. He died when he was 4 years old. He was born in 1918 and died in 1922.
Was this from scarlet fever?
Diphtheria. And I blamed the doctor for it. Should have given him 10,000 units of antitoxin in the morning, and he only gave him 5. Come back in the evening and give him 5 more, but it's too late. He got too big a hold on him. We thought he got over it. So on his birthday, I bought a little wagon for him, a little red wagon. So I came home from work that evening, and Mary was sitting out on the back steps with him. And she says to me, she says, "Daddy, something the matter with this little boy?" I said, "What's the matter?" "Well, look at his face. He's all flushed, He's breathing hard." I said, "Go get a pillow." I put the pillow in the wagon, we put him in. I took him down to Dr. Snare. That was in that big 2-story house across from the Blue Parrot. That's where he had his office. And then he says, "You take him home, put him to bed, and I'll be up in the morning the first thing." He lingered for 6 weeks. He had what they call myocarditis. That paralyzes the respiratory muscles. Well, we had him in the hospital for about 24 hours. He couldn't really do it. We got him buried over at Green Mountain. He's one of the first graves in that section. I even got a picture of that.
So, and that was when you had him.
Then Lois was born up later. See, Lois will be 52 in July. And that piano's been sitting there 45 years. That's when we started her on that piano when she was 7 years old. The first teacher was Violet McCarthy. And her next teacher was Bernice Arderell. They were all teachers at the high school, the old high school up there, where the apartments are. And then when they moved up, Lois went to high school up here. Mabel Wickham. And when Mabel Wickham told Lois one day, "Well, Lois, can't teach you anymore." She says, "I'm getting ahead of me now." So she went to Lamont School of Music for 18 months. She and her mother used to drive down there every Saturday morning with a Model T. No, it was my Plymouth, my old 34 Plymouth. Lois used to drive then. See, she was in high school, I got a picture of Lois with the big bass horn when she was just a girl. And her prom, when she went to the prom that night. Well, I got a lot of old things, I'll tell you.
That's great to hear. Wait, I want the brick, the old brick company store that was on
right
the
there at the
corner.
Louisville Oil Company. That's
Yeah.
where we used to play basketball games.
Oh, really?
Upstairs.
Do you remember what year that was torn down?
Well, let's see, I graduated. See, we played there before we started to play in the Red Man Hall. Well,
It was condemned in 1909.
yeah, it was torn down shortly after that.
Okay.
Shortly after that, because then they built that corner in there, that filling station. Mossoni used to run that filling station when it was first built. Him in Virginia. You remember Virginia? Dishing out gas? Yeah. And then Adolph Lasnik took it over. They ran a little grocery store in there for a while. Him and Mike Kalachi.
No, I don't remember.
Yeah, before they made a filling station out of it. And it's been a filling station ever since. They had a grocery store in there before Mossoni ran the filling station.
Like that.
And the old City Hall used to sit there on the north side of it, between Roy Austin's house.
Well, now, do you remember in the early pictures we have that was on the sidewalk, but at some point it was moved back off the street?
What was that, the City Hall?
The City Hall.
Yeah, it was right out. They used to build all the buildings right out on the
Uh-huh.
sidewalk. It was moved back just a little ways.
Well, do you remember when?
I can't tell you the dates,
Okay.
because I never wrote them down, you know,
Yeah.
which I should have.
We
And
don't think of those things.
yeah.
Very happy.
But the old Robert Thorway's Market used to be right on the sidewalk. The front steps went right up off of the sidewalk. Now it's right there not quite where the library sits, right where the City Hall sits. Because where the library sits, that's where that two-story house was. That was the
Right.
old Giles place,
Right.
you know.
We all Thirlaways lived there too.
Yeah,
I think they were the last ones.
Yeah. yeah.
Not, is that the name of the
Robert Thorway's.
Parks.
Huh?
Alberta.
Yeah, their names were
Parks.
their names was Thirlaway
Yeah,
too.
before
she married
Alberta
Parks.
and her husband
Yeah.
lived there. Or
Orrin, yeah.
and
Yeah.
Alberta Parks lived there
That's
before
right.
they tore it down.
Now, did the Thirlaways live down where Dr. Snare lived?
The old Thorway, yeah. Robert Thorway's folks lived down there.
Okay.
And Robert Thorway lived up there on Lincoln. Up
Yes.
there where Davises live up there. Where you know where they're remodeling Mrs. Henrietta's house up there? Have you ever been up there lately?
Oh, sure.
Well, that's where Robert Thorway used to live. Now, I used to live down here on next door to Paul Boyce when I got married. See, I only moved a block north. I lived there 18 months, and then I moved another block north, right next to Hilda Thompson. That's when I bought this place, in 1920. See, Lois was born in that there front bedroom there.
Rick, about what were houses selling for at that time?
Do you know what I paid for this house?
I don't have any idea.
I paid $1,100 for this house.
And if that was about the general price of
Well,
houses?
yeah,
then, or
but they
was it
weren't much. Yeah, they were just shacks. They weren't houses.
I see.
They only had old pine floors.
Mm-hmm.
I only had a hole in the ground underneath here. It wasn't a basement. It just a little hole in the ground. It was only 4 feet deep on account of my foundation being so high.
Mm-hmm.
And the bathroom wasn't even finished. We had a tub in there and a little bitty old wash basin.
Mm-hmm.
We had a little bitty old sink there in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And little by little, I fixed it up. Now it's worth about $27,500.
Mm-hmm.
I've done all this work here within the last 5 or 6 years. Lowered the ceilings. Mr. Fleming put that paneling in there.
Oh, and I was thinking how pretty it looks with the old woodwork.
Well, you know,
Really
that's
is
the type, you know, I didn't want, when Mr. Fleming come up, I don't want you to touch the woodwork.
nice.
I want you to put the paneling in and leave the woodwork just as is. Well, he says, and when I went down and I looked at the paneling before we bought it, and they had 8 different types down there. So one day I said to Mary and Lois, let's go down to Steinbach's. I want you to pick out a paneling. That's what they picked. The highest priced panel they had down there.
Well, it's worth it. It's really pretty.
You know, and people, it's the first time they see it, they when did you do that? Rico, boy, it's beautiful. And our old chimney's inside there. From my furnace chimney goes right up. I had somebody connect the furnace with my old chimney that we used the old heater with. We used to have an old heater there. And I had a furnace put in. Bob Thompson installed the furnace. And I fixed up the I had to dig my cellar 2 feet deeper. Then I cemented the floor and put cinder block all around the walls and cement shelves. We don't have nothing on the floor except, well, Lois uses that as a den down there. She's got her desk and her typewriter, and we got our hot water heater. She has a TV and a radio and our ironing board, and all our stuff is up on a shelf off of the floor. It's nice, and then my coal hose on the outside, so I keep it closed all the time. I used to use coal, converted to gas, and it keeps this house nice and cozy. Our bills ain't as high as a lot of people have to pay. Now, something else you want to ask?
Do you remember the Depression? Was there a time when the Depression really bothered you?
Yeah, when they had the... Yeah, I lost money in the Depression in '29. I had some city service stock, and I was just about to sell it. You know, it went up to a pretty good price. Mossoni and I both had stock. And before we could sell it, the bottom dropped out. I lost every penny. $5,500 I lost. Yeah, well, times were hard. I remember I was working for Loot then. And that was during the wobbly strike, too, during the Depression, too. Loot used to charge an awful lot. He lost an awful lot of money. People run up bills $500-600 for food, you know. He wouldn't let anybody go hungry. He was sure good that way, but he lost an awful lot of money. Yeah. Yeah, they had a commissary then too, right there where, you know, the old pool hall that used to be there where Kalachi's restaurant is now?
Right.
Well,
Boney used to have it.
yeah, Boney used to have it. Well, that's where the commissary was. They used to sell food pretty darn cheap, I'll tell you.
Who sponsored these commissaries?
Well, the unions.
I see.
The unions always sponsored them. They'd put up the money to buy the merchandise, you know. And
So that would be the opposite of a company store.
yeah,
then, wouldn't it?
well, the opposite, you know. They never try to make a profit just so they got their cost out of it. You know what I mean?
I see.
There was no profit made.
Who would you say were the leaders at that time?
Oh, they're probably all dead. I couldn't tell you.
You're probably too young.
Well, I'm too young. Too young then. But right now, there's only 3 people in Louisville that are originals.
And that's you
That's me.
and Mike.
No, not Mike Fabrizio. Me and Bessie Hicks, and Johnny Hicks' wife, the mother.
Her name is Bessie?
Bessie. She lives with Johnny Hicks down there on Jefferson. And then Annie Stubbs. She used to live up there in that trailer.
Right. She's over in a home.
She's in a home now in Boulder. Annie Stubbs was born in a little old house where Marge Lazook's house is. There's a little old house in there where she was born. And Bessie Hicks was born in that house where Herman Wiesig built his shop down there. You remember that old house that used to sit in there?
Yes.
Well, that's where Bessie Hicks was born. We're the 3 oldest originals in Louisville. There's a lot of older people in Louisville than I am, but they moved in here, like Joe Malcolm, Joe Kasinga, Jack, what's his name up there? Lives up close to you?
Oh, the Englishman.
Oh, Watson.
Jack Watson. And Papa Joe, you know, old Joe Morelli. There's lots of older people in Louisville than me, but they're not originals. And Mike Fabrizio, they came from Como. His folks came from Como. And Mossoni, he came here when he's 12 years old. He's as old as I am, not quite, but in September, him and Mike's birthday is September, and they'll be 86 too. But you're going to ask me something about the mines. I remember the mines. There used to be a switch engine stationed here all the time just to keep the empties and the loads moving. And heck, a lot of times we'd have sightseeing parties, you know, the high school kids. We've been in the old ACME Mine, we was in the Rex in the mine, the Heckley Mine. I've been in the Matchless and old Sunnyside out there. I don't know how many mines. There's old Sunnyside, Monarch 1, the Brooks, Centennial 1, Centennial 2, the Highway, the first mine here, the Louisville mine, Rex 1, Rex 2, Heckley, the electric mine over there where the old power plant used to be, the old Aberdare, right there where the public services got their gas station on there on 42, is a little slope mine. And the ACME Mine right in the city limits, and the Caledonia down here where the cement place is. Then over there along that bluff there on Coal Creek, there's 3 or 4 little old slope mines in the side of the hill. The Wilson and the Aberdare and the Slits, and then there's the industrial mine and 2 Russell mines, and there's a Pluto and Nick Conley's mine there at Superior. And over in Marshall there's Monarch number 1, and the Gorham number 2, the Peerless, the Red Ash, and the Fox. Mr. Hoyt used to, before he started work for the bank here, he used to ride the Interurban from Boulder. He used to be the clerk at the Fox mine. Have you ever been through Marshall on that old road?
Yes.
Have you ever noticed on the north side those holes in that sandrock
Yes.
ledge?
Yes.
I was born in one of those holes.
You were?
Yep. The dirt floor, my dad built a building around that hole in that cement sandrock wall. That's where I was born. Chas was born there too. And then I had a brother that died in infancy. He was born there. See, when my dad sent for mother, he was in Marshall. And Mrs. Porter, you know, all the Edith Porter, Ben and Boots and Spud, their mother, she was born in Italy. Right when Dad moved to Marshall, then he sent for him. See, he first settled in Gillespie, Illinois. That's the Illinois coal fields. Mm-hmm. So when they found out they opened mines in Boulder County, that's where he came. And when I was a kid, Mom used to have a lot of boarders. I used to scrub the floors on my hand and knees, wooden floors, pine floors. That's all this house had, was just old pine floors. And we put hardwood floors. I got the nicest hardwood floors you could buy. My brother and I both worked and put them down ourselves. Only cost us $67.50 a 1,000 square feet those days. Now it costs you $300.
Rick, I was just wondering if you felt that the unions had done a lot of good for the men.
They sure did. They used to work for $3 a day, for 10 hours a day before the union came in.
So generally you feel that they're
Well,
coming
absolutely. The unions is what's made the coal miners. They're the best paid workmen in the United States right now. $50 to $58 a day they make now when they go down one of them holes. They're entitled to it. Because I was down, when I was a kid, 12 years old, my dad and my brother Chas worked at the Rex 1. That's just mine right over here where the Harney's place is. I used to go down with them on a Saturday. They used to work 6 days a week. And I was the lamp boy. They used to burn lard oil, and they had those lamps they hooked on their pit caps, you know, before they got carbide lamps or electric lamps. And I used to keep the wicks trimmed, and I'd keep the lamps. I always had a spare lamp. Pretty soon I'd hear my brother Chas say, "Hey, Rick, bring me a lamp, mine's going out." So I'd take him a new lamp. I'd light it, take it to him, bring the other one back and fix it up and have it ready for Dad when he hollered. I used to go down on Saturdays often with him. They didn't care those days, you know, until they got strict with these mining laws. And I remember at the time a bunch of us went in down to ACME High School. We had one of the teachers with us, and they had a man put us in those old pit cars and had one of them mules hooked onto us before they had motors, even before they had electric motors. And us kids, we used to go to the mines and pick coal off of the dirt dumps. We never bought a pound of coal. We had a little wagon that we could haul 500 pounds of coal on it. This old bachelor that used to live with my folks, he made it for us. He made it just like a big wagon. We could haul 500 pounds of coal. We never bought a pound of coal.
Do you remember when the ACME Mine closed? This would be a...
Well, it's hard to say. Some of these miners could tell you that better than me.
Yeah, okay.
If you get a hold of one of these old coal miners, you know, because I didn't pay much attention to that, you know, to the mining. And I can remember, though, when the ACME Mine was running, there was a stream of water coming out of that mine, 6-inch stream of water every day with pumps. That's how wet it is. That's why Mayhoffer's got that good well there. And Kubert Warrenberg's got one out there in his field. He can't pump it dry. He's got 2 ponds out there he fills, and he irrigates all his ground up there with it. And Mrs. Mayhoffer can't pump unless he says so. Because he filed on that underground water before she did, see. And he gets all the water he wants, and he'll call her up and says, well, if you want to pump, go ahead and pump. And she'll come up and start her pump. 8-inch stream of water coming out of that hole. All this ground under here is just underlined with water. All the mines had to pump.
About how far down is
Well, the first vein here at the ACME was only 90 feet. When they worked it out, they went down to 185 feet. That's about the average around here, about 185 to 200 feet.
Do you suppose this water is still running? It's
Yep.
running into the mines.
Well, it seeps in. There's an underground current someplace from the mountains, see?
Yeah.
It seeps in. The ground gets in that strata, you know,
Yeah.
and it just travels. You want me to see some of that old stuff?